Hello audience, Mr. Z here. The Dutch Empire and Netherlands as a whole are subjects often overlooked within the alternate history community, so today I thought we'd discuss perhaps one of the more interesting takes on the nation's direction, the Anglo-Dutch Empire, a proposed union between the two put forth sometime following the seceding of the Netherlands from the Spanish Habsburgs. Nothing ever came of it though, and the two would go on to develop a rivalry during the Anglo-Dutch Wars, a series of conflicts based around rights to colonial expansion and domination of the sea. 2 victories were taken by the British, and 2 by the Dutch. But what's really fascinating is what occurred in 1688, when a union of parliamentarians, along with an invading Dutch army, managed to overthrow King James II and install William of Orange. The reason for this was that King James II was a Catholic, something most British at the time strongly opposed. However, his daughter Mary was a Protestant, and was to ascend the throne with William of Orange as her husband, thus preventing a Catholic dynasty from ruling over the kingdoms. However, in 1688, James became father to a boy, who, because he was a boy, would become the next immediate heir, one James would raise devoutly Catholic. The British people, Parliament, and William simply weren't having it, and thus the Glorious Revolution was initiated. Unfortunately, this golden opportunity would not turn up well for the Dutch, as William and Mary would fail to produce any children, leaving the throne in the hands of Mary's sister Anne, who had no surviving children, something which would complicate the line of succession that William had laid out, leading many to fear a restoration of King James II's line. Thus, a new settlement was established, giving rule to any non-Catholic relatives. William's death would mean the extinction of the House of Orange and placing of Anne as Queen of the Kingdoms. She would be succeeded by the Hanoverian kings, of which King George III was one of them, spelling the gradual distancing and end of Dutch rule in Britain. However, one major thing the Dutch didn't see coming was that King William's rule meant the shifting of dominance in world trade from the Dutch Republic to England. In short, the Dutch got the short end of the stick here. However, let's change that and assume that the House of Orange manages to stay in power, eventually unifying the kingdoms with the Republic, which, frankly, seems simple enough. All we need is for William and Mary to have a proper heir, one who will live long enough to propose unification, or just sneak it into the political union of Scotland and England in 1707. It might also help if William of Orange had made some extra efforts on his part to further ties between the United Dutch provinces, Scotland and England, to ensure a sense of mutual benefit and a sense of unity. So, by the early 1700s, let's assume that the Anglo-Dutch Empire is established, encompassing the Netherlands, England, Scotland, Ireland, as well as colonial holdings within the Americas, Africa, and India. The conflicts which led to the 7 Years' War in our timeline would almost certainly still occur, as there was historically a deep animosity between the French Empire and House of Orange. This would likely lead to an outcome much like in our timeline, with the Anglo-Dutch Empire claiming France's colonial holdings within North America. The interesting point to address would be the subsequent American Revolution. It's hard to nail down exactly when in time this would occur, as there's no guarantee that the Anglo-Dutch Empire would tax the colonies as King George did. As a matter of fact, they may even express further bravado and demand that France pay them back instead of the American colonies. However, it's inevitable that the colonies will break away from Britain, so to avoid overcomplication, we'll just say that the American Revolution goes more or less on cue, though with less resistance from the Anglo-Dutch Empire, which would have stepped up its competition with France, and wouldn't want to spread itself too thin within the American colonies, which were becoming more trouble than they were worth. Plus, they still had good old Canada, so all's well that ends well. The Empire would see tremendous strife growing within France, and may even conspire to fuel the fires of revolution, backing the Jacobins, using the chaos of the revolution to establish ports on the French coast, under the guise of establishing evacuation points for French nobles, and essentially turning France into a puppet state, and using it as a proxy through which to weaken and eliminate its imperial competition. That is until Napoleon. Just as in our timeline, Napoleon would be a staunch Corsican nationalist during the French Revolution, and it would be through this and his interactions with the Jacobins that he became a useful tool of the Anglo-Dutch Empire, gradually rising through the ranks, gaining favor with the Anglo-Dutch royals, and most importantly with the French, to whom he would become the face of hope and leadership. He'd become the chief general of the French Republic, and gained massive acclaim following his victories over the Austrians in the Italian peninsula. He was doing the dirty work of the empire in the name of the French Republic, but behind closed doors, a fire was rising within the young general. He'd come to realize that he had greater ambitions than simply being a sword to the crown. He realized the extent to which he'd been played like a pawn, and even come to sympathize with the struggles of the French people he saw around him. A once strong and proud people who had become atomized and alienated from the former glory. He sought not only to embrace the man he was destined to be, but seek revenge against the Empire, not only for himself, but for France. Napoleon would use the influence the Empire had bestowed upon him to consolidate power for himself within France, promoting a restoration of French greatness and a reclamation of their occupied coasts. It would be this which would ignite what was a growing tension between the French and their Anglo-Dutch occupiers. Napoleon would assert that France has no true independence, that it is not a state at all, but a mere province of a growing imperial force looming to its north. The same oppressor which had stole their colonial holdings decades ago, forced them into poverty, and even orchestrated the revolution which led their nation to the servile state it's currently in. That the French people should rise up and reclaim what is theirs, and with the backing of the people and the military, so would Napoleon proceed to unite with Spain through similar motivations, and issue a declaration of war against the Anglo-Dutch Empire. Now, you might assume that this would follow the course of the Napoleonic Wars just as in our timeline. However, things become a little more interesting this time around, as given the fact that the Empire was in support of the French revolutions, this would attract the ire of nations who felt such ideas threatened the existence of their own empires, particularly Austria, who was an immediate target following the French Revolution. The two agreed to a military alliance should the Empire or any of its allies instigate conflict, upon which France would invade and occupy the Netherlands before the two launched a naval campaign against the British Isles. This declaration would not be met well by the Anglo-Dutch Empire, however for the moment, things would come to a calm. But something clearly was brewing as France, Austria, and the Anglo-Dutch Empire began reinforcing their militaries, expanding their naval forces, and forming alliances for what would be a war to end all wars. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.